Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Solo Spooky Story. My name is Rob, and today I'll be your host. For those of you that don't know, the Solo Spooky Stories are shorter episodes every other week, presented by myself, where I'll just talk about something that I find pretty interesting, or we've had a listener submission where, someone's asked us to talk about a topic, and yeah, that's what these are. They're usually shorter, and it's just a one-on-one rather than the conversations usually between myself and Sis. And yeah, they're pretty fun to do. But yeah, with that said, I hope you're having a lovely day whenever it is that you're listening to this. I am personally recording this at a time that I usually don't, so it's kind of nice to switch it up a little bit. It's still bright outside, which is very unusual for my usual recording times. And yeah, it's pretty good. We're coming into, I suppose, mid-spring now at this point in Ireland, so things just seem warmer and nicer, and everything just is brighter, which is delightful. But as I said, whenever it is you're listening to this, I hope you're having a lovely day, and we're going to get into this. So today we're talking about something that I just absolutely adore. There's no other way to put it. I play a lot of video games. I'm a big video game fan. Always have been ever since I was a kid. And yeah, it's always been a part of my life, a hobby that I'm interested in. And it's continued despite numerous times where I may move away from them for a little bit. I always end up coming back and just looking for new stuff all the time. So I'm a huge fan of video games, and there's very few kind of genres of games that I wouldn't usually play. I like to kind of stay pretty open to all different sorts of games, and that also includes then it goes into the world of board games and various card games and things like that as well. But the main fascination that I have is always with video games. And with video games comes just these really kind of interesting stories on the internet that are mostly just creepypastas, just, fictional stories of video games that are kind of spooky or paranormal or haunted, basically, for lack of a better word. And it's always something that I've loved, and I'm a huge fan of horror video games and just horror in general. And the fact that you could have potential stories about haunted video games themselves, it's a bit of a no-brainer for me to do an episode on it. So I've gone off, looked online, found a few video games and some stories behind them about them being haunted. Whether or not the video games exist is another thing entirely, but I've gathered a few. I have a couple of them. We'll see how many we get into today for a short episode, and if people are interested, I can come back and revisit this in the future. But yeah, so we're gonna get into it today. So I suppose the cross between video games and the supernatural has kind of given a rise to this unique kind of digital folklore about haunted video games. And I suppose the lines are becoming slightly more blurred, or it's easier for these stories to be created when you have all of these different types of games that are out there. And I suppose the traditional sense of video games is kind of arcade games where you go to like a specific place to play video games, and then it kind of transformed into your home where you could play games at home, and you could you didn't have to leave the house basically to play a video game, and you didn't have to go to an arcade. That's since kind of transformed again now into these kind of social games, like alternate reality games, ARGs, where you're now able to go outside and play games and kind of participate in games away from your home, away from arcades, and still take part in the game. So the likes of like Pokemon Go, for example, or the various other alternate reality games that are out there, it kind of changed things a little bit, where you kind of removed the anchor point that was your home or the arcade center, and it's now you can bring it anywhere. Like smartphones have really kind of changed the game with that. And you now have the likes of like handheld consoles are really coming around now, the likes of the Steam Deck or the Nintendo Switch and things like that. Game Boys and things like that have always, or not always, but they've been around for the last 30 plus years. But we're really seeing a resurgence now in all sorts of different ways to play video games. And it's kind of, I suppose, blurred the lines a little bit and made it easier for these haunted video game stories to be created. Then you have places obviously like Reddit, where there's a lot of crossover between video game nerds basically and people who are online and interested in these sort of things like horror stories and all. And it's basically just a perfect recipe for these great stories to be created. So as I said, we're going to go through a few of them today and see what you think. But I suppose it's fair to say that the haunted video game legends are a fairly distinctive niche in the broader landscape of urban legends and internet folklore. You have a lot of like creepypastas, myself and Suze have talked at length before about like the SCP stories and things like that. Like if you know about them, you know. And yeah, they're just really, really interesting. And I suppose unlike traditional ghost stories, these narratives and stories are kindly deeply entwined with like the interactive aspect or the participatory nature of gaming. And these stories are always posted online, so the storytelling is kind of further, kind of almost like collaborative, where the lore about these stories is kind of created in new ways on forums and things like that. And yeah, they're really, really interesting. And the term creepypasta, we've talked about it a few times. I understand that people may not understand what that is. It's basically it means text that's been copied and pasted across the internet, and it's become synonymous with these digital horror stories, which are often presented as these first person accounts, and they're accompanied by generally grainy images or videos or even playable files in certain circumstances. And they're very, very popular on places like Reddit and things like that. So you'll have things like Slenderman, for example, is a creepypasta where it's kind of created its own lore around it, and it's now become like established as like an actual like myth, I suppose, for lack of a better word. And I suppose the rise of these like haunted video game stories can be traced to several factors. I suppose the excitement around digital technology and its progression, as I talked at the start, around the advancements in it, that you can now bring video games with you anywhere. And then I suppose you've got as I talked about, the collaborative authorship and things like that as well. And then platforms like Reddit or YouTube or dedicated wikis playing this kind of crucial role in not just the creation, but then the dissemination and preservation of haunted games and the stories around them. So it's got this cool community out there now where people are really interested in them. So I'm going to talk firstly about probably the most famous haunted video game legend that's out there, and it's technically not even real, I guess. But we're going to talk about Polybius. And this is an arcade urban legend, so it's appropriate that we start in the arcade where this all starts. So Polybius is probably the most famous haunted video game legend, and it's cited as effectively like the Necronomicon of gaming myths. It's this fictional story that's out there that kind of people can't 100% decide whether or not it's real or not. Like, or at least the lore can't decide if it's real or not. I think in reality we know it isn't, but there's that kind of, the internet communities out there really push for it to be real, and it kind of just further pushes the narrative and the lore around it and the additional collaboration in the extension of this myth. So according to the story, a mysterious arcade cabinet appeared in Portland, Oregon in 1981, and the game was developed by the Sinus company, and it was said to induce psychoactive effects like amnesia, seizures, night terrors, hallucinations, and even insanity, and then in the maddest cases, death. And it basically, what happened with this gaming cabinet was that it was reportedly so addictive that children fought for turns and were basically turned into this almost trance-like state when they were playing it. The story then expands that the men in black were seen monitoring players, and that they basically collected data before the machines ultimately vanished without a trace, which is a lovely way to wrap up the story. But I suppose this specific legend is rich in, I suppose, conspiracy motifs, because you've got a bit of everything in here. You've got like government mind control experiments, or maybe you've got potential, CIA involvement, or like MK Ultra with the whole kind of like mind control stuff and all that, the Men in Black and everything. And then you've got the idea that video games are being used as a tool for like psychological manipulation and things like that. So people love this, like people love these sort of stories. And even the game's supposed publisher, Sinneslöschen, it's a pseudo-German term meaning sense deletion. And it just adds to, I suppose, the whole aura that's around this myth. And it's one of those stories that it has lingered for quite a while. And this is despite no physical evidence of the game having ever surfaced. And yeah, basically the earliest known online reference to this is in 1998 in a post online. With the first, I suppose, print mention of it in a magazine in 2003. So yeah, the myth itself, it spread through these early internet forums, gaming magazines, and then I suppose later on then more mainstream forms of media. And the original entry, the online forum that talked about it, it included a fabricated screenshot, and it kind of became this focal point for speculation and eyewitness accounts where people would point to the screenshot and be like, that's exactly what I saw. That's 100% it. Like, I've seen this. And it just kind of builds the lore and the story around it. Then the legend was further popularized by a magazine write-up about it, which talked about the secrets and lies features of video games. And then this again was furthered then by forum posts in the early noughties with people who claimed to have actually developed the game. And yeah, it's kind of these like hoax interviews basically where people talked about how they were involved in writing the game, they were involved in developing it, and they're kind of putting their life on the line by talking about it. And yeah, it's just this really, really cool, I suppose, just additional building and building and building, like a snowball effect almost of the story being built out of more and more different areas. And with all of this happening, journalists have actually tried to trace the legend's roots to real events. And allegedly, in 1981 in Portland, 2 arcade players did fall ill on the same day. And the FBI allegedly then raided arcades around this time for illegal gambling machines. And it kind of just, the two stories kind of just merged in together, I guess, and kind of built the foundation for the story. And these incidents, I suppose, combined with parental anxieties around video game addiction at the time and the stories that video games will make kids violent and all that sort of stuff. It's not unusual to see more and more people kind of getting on the bandwagon with the stories and, you know, building the lore around it and talking about, you know, oh, if you play in arcades too long, you know, you can have seizures or you could die from being like addicted to it. And it's perfect fertile ground, I suppose, for just making a story like this. And yeah, there's been numerous investigations. People have looked into it. They've obviously found no evidence at all that Polybius has ever actually existed. No arcade cabinets or ROM images or contemporary news reports have ever surfaced. The supposed publisher has no record of even existing outside of the legend, and gaming historians have basically concluded that the story is a total hoax, and it effectively, they've determined that it originated as a promotional stunt for that initial online forum. So the legend does kind of persist though, and it's just this cool, compelling story. It kind of blends like a bit of nostalgia. People love paranoia, stories about paranoia, and just kind of the weirdness that comes with the paranormal. And yeah, it's become this kind of enduring symbol of the haunted game folklore that I talked about. It's been referenced in music videos like 9 Inch Nails. It was mentioned on The Simpsons. There's been numerous indie games and art projects. There's been podcasts about it, audio dramas about it. There's even been 2 games that came out. Both were called Polybius. One was released in 2007, one was in 2017. And the one actually that came out in 2017 was released on PlayStation VR. So people could actually play like a VR version of Polybius and be involved in the world and the myth and everything like that. So yeah, it's a fascinating story, and it's just so cool that I had to talk about it as the first story because it deserves the attention that it does get. Moving on then into another just cool story. We are talking about the haunted Majora's Mask cartridge. So the legends and origins around this is a funny one because for those that aren't familiar with Majora's Mask, it's from The Legend of Zelda, and this is a wild story that's just living out there online. So this is definitely a creepypasta again, and it's become this augmented reality game in a sense that was created by someone called Alex Hall in 2010. And the story begins with a college student acquiring a Nintendo 64 cartridge of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask from a mysterious old man at a garage sale. It's a great start to the story. And the cartridge contains a save file named Ben. For those of you that don't remember playing or are too young to remember playing on these games, you saved your game to the cartridge. So if you bought secondhand Nintendo games, oftentimes you would see the last person who played it, you'd see their save file and things like that. So, you know, kind of secondhand Pokemon games and everything like that could sometimes be an absolute goldmine because you could load into them. And it actually happened to me. I bought a version of Pokemon Yellow, and the previous owner's save file was still there, I was able to load it up, and they had some serious Pokemon in there, and it was great. Like, it was so cool to see this, I suppose, like, saved digital record of the last person that played it. It was really, really cool. But yeah, so this cartridge contained a save file for a character or a person called Ben. And as the protagonist of the story starts playing, they start to experience these increasingly bizarre and terrifying glitches. The NPCs, or the non-player characters in the game, allegedly call him Ben. The music begins to distort, and there's this like infamous elegy of emptiness statue that stalks him, and I'll post a video, or not a video, I'll post a picture of this alleged statue that supposedly follows him around the game. But the whole point of the story is that the game seems to be appearing to communicate directly with the player, and it's kind of blurring the line between fiction and reality, and it's almost like this self-aware video game that's like haunting the person, and it's kind of impacting their life in such ways, and it's communicating with them through the game. It's really cool. And the narrative kind of unfolds through a series of posts online and alleged YouTube videos of hacked gameplay, that there's interactive puzzles there, and yeah, basically the story kind of culminates eventually in revealing that the cartridge itself is haunted by the spirit of a boy named Ben who allegedly drowned. And the story kind of expanded into this really complex alternate reality game where it involved like hidden websites online, like ciphers, and then allegedly like within the story itself then there's this mystery kind of doomsday cult called the Moon Children, and it's kind of spawned this like multi-arc saga that continued right through to 2020. So this story was being added to consistently from kind of 2010 through to 2020 with all sorts of mad stuff going on, and like I could basically do a full episode on that itself. Like, it's very, very cool. But yeah, this story kind of went viral almost overnight, and it was kind of praised for its innovative use of storytelling and its ability to create a sense of genuine unease while you're looking at it. Like, there's some images out there that genuinely are quite spooky. And the alternate reality game format really encouraged audience participation in figuring out this story, and I suppose developing and expanding the lore more and more. And in a sense, by playing the game, people are then furthering the haunted video game story lore as it is. So it's just really, really cool way to tell things and tell stories about it. And yeah, the people who got involved, they were trying to decode clues that were found and uncover like hidden websites that were there in the background. And some people allegedly even received physical mail related to the story, those that kind of were involved more in it. Again, allegedly, I don't know if that's true or not, but I did see some posts about it online. And I suppose the narrative kind of blended these actual real in-game glitches that were just in the game, because the development of Majora's Mask is one of kind of comedy in the sense that it was rushed and a lot of assets were reused, and it was basically kind of like quickly thrown together and put out there. So there are a lot of glitches in the game, and the knowledge of these glitches, I suppose, was used to the advantage of the storytellers, who were able to manipulate the glitches and be like, oh, you know, if you look at the glitch this specific way or do this specific thing, this happens. And it just kind of furthers the whole believability of it, I suppose. I suppose then when you bring the real world interactions of the supposed like actual physical mail being delivered, and real world, I suppose, as well, of like hidden websites and all that, it really kind of builds this psychological horror that is unlike anything that's happened before anyway, in that people are unraveling the story as it's going along, and even though it's fictional in a sense, it becomes a real story for them because they're all involved in this mystery themselves, and it's fascinating. Like, the story's reach then, it extended way beyond its original platforms. There's been fan art, there's been all sorts of stories about it, there's dedicated wikis and forums. There's so much out there on this, and yeah, it's talked about so much online. And even though it is explicitly a work of fiction, its presentation as a first-person account, complete with the alleged video evidence and interactive elements, it's kind of led to many people questioning its authenticity, and a lot of people actually thinking that there might be something to this. Obviously, there isn't, but it has led to people kind of questioning reality around this. And the story's creator himself has been open about it being fictional in nature, but the alternate reality kind of games aspect to it was so immersive in design and the community's willingness to play along that it's kind of, I think, fair to say it's blurred the boundaries between reality and performance now. And the legend and the myth around it now has effectively becomes an example of the digital kind of world and the psychology of belief in online environments. Like, it's actually fascinating. And yeah, it's probably one of the most influential creepypastas out there. It's basically credited itself with creating the haunted game subgenre. I know Polybius, I talked about before, is kind of one of the earlier ones, but this really like hit home that these things can be horror games. Like, this can be a horror story, like about something being haunted. Like, this is, it's got everything, you know, the haunted game, it's got the curse of the dead boy in it. Like, it's got everything basically that you need in a horror story. And yeah, it's been referenced actually wildly enough in actual academic studies. There's been media retrospectives on it, and it was even considered for film adaptation. Like, that's how well this story has made an impact on the world of the internet, that people have actually thought about making a film about it just to talk about how good it is. And yeah, it's just one of those, like, between this and Polybius, like, they basically cover such a fascinating part of the internet that, yeah, it's just so interesting to me, and hopefully interesting to you as well. But yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there. I have a number of other games that I can talk about, so if people are interested in them, I'll do a follow-up episode here, but I'm just conscious that this is one of the short episodes and I don't want to run on too long with it, so we'll leave it there. And as I said, if you're interested, you can let me know. So you can reach out to me on social media. You can get me on Threads or Instagram at the Spooky AF Pod. You can send us an email at the spookyafpodcast@gmail.com. You can get us in YouTube comments. We're kind of in a number of places, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. And if you yourself have any interest in spooky lore about video games that you're aware of, or if you've any knowledge of any of these games, or if you've participated in any of these ARGs yourself, or yeah, just your general thoughts on it, I'd genuinely love to hear. And if you've any other games you want me to look into, or myths around it, or any other internet myths for that matter, let myself or Suze know. We'd love to be helpful in that, in research on whatever you'd like us to look into. But yeah, with that said, I hope you're having a lovely day whenever it is you're listening to this, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy, guys.